The new recruit had just received his first military uniform, but soon he noticed that the collar had someone else's name on it.
Entschuldigung, die gehört schon wem.
When he showed it to the officer calmly explained.
Aber ihr wollt zu klein für den Kerl, ne? Da kommt immer wieder vor. Hier, macht J.
After hearing the explanation, the boy let go of his doubts, but he didn't notice the countless name tags piled up under the officer's feet, all torn off for the same reason. These uniforms, which made the boys proud, had been worn by another group of young men just days before, but they had already been killed on the Western Front. Their clothes recovered, the blood washed away, the bullet holes stitched up. In 1917, World War I had been ongoing for 3 years, and the Western Front had reached a stalemate. To advance just a few hundred meters, hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost in the trenches. Politicians turned their eyes to the campuses. They filled the youth with passion and glory.
Die Zukunft Deutschlands liegt in den Händen seiner größten Generation. Meine Freunde, das sind Sie!
Paul and his 3 best friends enlisted. They put on new uniforms, sang old songs, and dreamed of a quick victory in Paris. But soon, a sudden shell shattered their naive fantasies. When they arrived at the front lines, what greeted them wasn't battle, but endless mud and standing water. During a night watch, Paul was drawn to a small noise.
Unsere ersten Franzosen.
He didn't know it was just a rat on a dead body. Excited, he raised his rifle. But the muzzle flash exposed their position, and he was shot at by enemy snipers. Fortunately, his steel helmet saved his life, but true terror was still to come. In the dead of night, a flare lit up the sky. French artillery rained down like a storm. Everyone ran for cover. The reality of the battlefield made fear visible on their faces. When he woke up from the rubble, the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder and the cries of his fallen comrades. His first task was to collect the name tags. Suddenly, he stepped on a pair of broken glasses. Only his best friend, Albert, wore glasses in the entire company. Not far away, he found Albert's lifeless body. The heroic dream he once had was cut short in the mud and blood. The news of the German army's defeat was quickly sent to the rear headquarters. They slowly moved toward the negotiation table. During a brief rest period, Paul became friends with the veteran Kat. They stole a goose to improve the squad's meal. The smell of goose stew was a rare warm moment in the war. During these days of respite, they finally enjoyed a rare moment of peace. Kat was illiterate, and Paul read aloud his wife's letter to him. In the letter, his wife mentioned her longing for a peaceful future. This was exactly what Kat had been hoping for. Soon, their squad was ordered to search for 60 missing new recruits. In an abandoned factory, they found those young boys, but unfortunately, they had already become cold corpses. The war had started to devour the nation's future. The outcome of this war seemed already decided. In November 1918, the German delegation went to France to negotiate an armistice. The French set extremely harsh terms, giving only 72 hours to decide. But the generals at the front refused to accept it. They still clung to the fantasy of victory. They ordered a final charge. By this time, the soldiers had lost their fervor. 4 years of war had left only survival instincts. When the charge was called, they numbly ran forward, shooting and killing. This morning assault was successful. Paul and his comrades broke through the French lines. The table was full of food, and they briefly forgot the war. But the ground began to shake. French tanks launched a counterattack. The steel behemoths crushed everything, and the Germans were routed. Paul was blown away by the blast from a shell. He witnessed firsthand his fellow soldier being engulfed in flames. Veteran Kat appeared just in time, dragging him back towards safety. During the escape, Paul fell into a shell crater. He encountered a French soldier. He instinctively stabbed the bayonet into the soldier's chest. He didn't stop until the soldier stopped breathing. Paul felt repulsed by the blood on his hands. He didn't understand how he had become like this. Overwhelming guilt made him wish he could save the soldier's life. But by then, it was too late. What broke him further was finding a family photo in the soldier's pocket. He had killed a husband, a father, a simple printer. He remembered he was just a high school graduate. The guilt almost tore him apart. The war had turned him into a beast he didn't recognize. Ironically, at that moment, the generals were in their rooms enjoying wine and fine food. Back at the base full of wounded soldiers, the reality was even harsher. A close friend of Paul's, unwilling to undergo amputation, ended his own life with a dinner fork. Paul's only remaining friend was the old soldier Kat. Meanwhile, the representatives in the rear were signing the unconditional armistice agreement. On November 11, 1918, the armistice would go into effect at 11 a.m. When the news came, the soldiers celebrated with gunshots. They knew that if they could survive the last 6 hours, the 4-year war would finally end. Paul and Kat dreamed of life after the war. To celebrate, they decided to have another goose feast. They sneaked into the farmer's house again, but the farmers soon discovered them. They narrowly escaped death at the hands of the farmers with their shotguns. The stolen goose egg brought them a rare taste of sweetness. When Cat went to relieve himself in the woods, the sound of a bullet being chambered came from behind him. The farmer's son was coldly staring at him. Paul ran into the woods and found Cat, relieved, but when he came out of the woods, he collapsed on the ground. The bullet had pierced Cat's abdomen. Paul helped him back to camp, but soon, Cat lost consciousness. When they finally made it back to the camp, the doctor declared Cat dead. Cat died just before the dawn of victory. Paul lost all his friends and was left with a broken heart. Just 15 minutes before the armistice was to take effect, the general gathered all the soldiers. His father had won countless victories, but he had failed on the front lines. For the sake of vanity, he ordered one last charge. Soldiers who refused to march were executed by firing squads. Everyone walked to the battlefield like zombies. This was a situation they didn't want to see but couldn't escape. Meanwhile, in the French trenches, soldiers were happily sharing wine. No one expected the crisis to arrive at that moment. This last raid allowed them to break through the French lines quickly. Paul fought hand-to-hand with a French officer in the mud. During the struggle, both fell into a tunnel. When they stood up, they reached a silent understanding and didn't attack each other. They silently waited for the clock to strike 11. But just then, a bayonet suddenly pierced Paul's chest from behind. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Just a few seconds later, the ceasefire command rang out across the battlefield. This was the sound Paul had been waiting for. He staggered outside. Soldiers from both sides came out of their trenches and shook hands. Once filled with hope and dreams for the future, Paul now only had those empty, hollow eyes. From then on, there was no more fighting on the Western Front, and Paul's life was forever left behind here. May the world live in peace, forever free of war.